Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walking Together podcast. Another day, another episode. No today, no to victory with the OGs. Here we are with Kyle Lewis.
Hey.
And Nick Adams.
Yeah.
And Jared Grantham.
Woo.
We are...
How very gathering of you, Jared.
Today we're going to be kind of continuing to talk about some random silly things, random weird questions that we might have about ourselves or just in general.
The grab
we don't
bag.
really know. It's the grab bag. So, it's a mystery.
And in a spiritual
And then we're going to go with a more deep, thought-provoking question.
And let me just say this question, because these guys don't know the question. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So we'll see how you guys think about this one.
Are we going to have an altar call at the end of the episode?
No, I'll just say tune in. You need to tune in if you want to. The word today is transparency.
You're going to have to be a little bit transparent with this question. You ready?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to kick it off. This is not the serious question for today, but I think it'll be a fun one. What is the worst purchase you've ever made in your life?
Ooh, worst purchase. I don't regret any purchase.
I'll start it off.
Actually, I do.
I always wanted a Land Rover, and everybody I talked to said, "Don't do it. Don't buy one. They break down. They look cool. Yeah, you see guys driving off road, but they are terrible cars." I didn't listen, and so we bought one, and I spent in the first 2 months more than I paid for the car.
Ooh.
Getting things fixed, and I ended up having to sell it. And I will never in my life own another Land Rover. It wasn't a new one. It was like a, 2007 or something like that. But maybe that was the problem. It was too old.
Nick?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I had a couple cars in mind, but now I'm trying to think of something else.
Yeah, I think everybody
had a lemon vehicle.
If you've made it to your mid 30s, I think everybody's had a car they regret buying.
Yeah.
I think my biggest regret purchase is the flooring I put in my house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't get the cheapest, but I didn't get the best.
Yeah.
And I put in, an LVP is like the big thing these days.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend. I can't speak for myself because I didn't put in the most expensive LVP, but dude, that stuff is just brittle. It breaks. So that's my biggest regret in purchases because it's a daily reminder. I see it every day.
Well, now you don't want to go through the trouble of tearing it all back up.
Not now, not with kids. I'm going to wait till they move out of the house.
Yep.
Right.
But that's a long time. Raylan's 7 years old. I got a good 11 years.
Yeah.
To deal with it.
So you're saying,
I don't think it's, I'm going to have, it's so bad that on the areas that are cracked, because it's all the joints are starting to crack. And I put it in how you're supposed to, and because there's any kind of flooring, if it's a floating floor, it's going to have a little bit of give on it, just a little bit. And so just imagine you take a thin piece of plastic and you just bend it just a little bit, like not even to where it's even noticeable that you're bending it, but do that 1,000 times, eventually it's going to break. And so that's what's happening all over my floor. And all the parts that are broken, because we don't want just random pieces missing in our floor, we've put packing tape over all of these spots. So at this point, we've got like at least a dozen places that have packing tape on it. And it's so bad that the other day Lindsay got out the packing tape for something, and Raylan was like, "Mommy, what are you using the floor tape for?"
your floor is staying together like the Beatles.
Bro, if I wait until Raylan graduates, I'm just gonna have my floor is gonna be laminated. The laminate floor is gonna be laminated.
Nice.
With floor tape.
Oh, man.
I just need to get those big sheets of plastic that you can buy that you can like self-laminate stuff with. Like just buy the biggest sheet I can and just do a coat over the whole floor. It's so dumb. That's
man.
probably that's the, yeah. Anyway.
Kyle, I'm still thinking.
You still thinking? So the worst purchase I ever made was not necessarily the purchase itself, but the timing of it. I waited until I had bald tires on my 94 Wrangler to go mudding. It was the I had a set of all-terrain tires on it, but the tread was maybe a quarter inch, maybe even less than that, probably 5/16 of an inch thick, deep. And waited to go mudding. Went with my buddy. It was right there by his house. Just being young and dumb, though, I didn't think about him renting his house back by some farmland. And we saw a doe walking through the woods, so we decided to take off after. And
In the vehicle.
yeah, driving the Jeep, and cut through a field, and got stuck. It was up to the axles, and I had to wait. We called everybody we knew to try and come get me out. Finally got somebody to come and pull me out, and right before he was getting ready to turn on the road down by my buddy's house, the farmer found me, and
In his field.
in the middle of his field, stuck up to the axles. And it was a Sunday. He had just got home from church, and he came speeding down the road.
Man.
And so the timing of that
He
could have
was
been a lot.
really happy you were there.
Yeah, he had to go and get the tractor and come and pull me out.
He did pull you out.
He did.
Was was there a crop?
No. It was a resting field, fortunately, but still, you just don't. Yeah,
That's not as bad.
it's not. But
It's not like you were driving through a cornfield that hadn't been harvested yet and you
Right.
ruined all of his crops.
right. No, it wasn't like
You were just churning it up, man. You're
I was
getting it
tilling
ready.
it. He should have paid me.
That's right.
Y'all ever bought stuff and never used it?
Yeah.
I was thinking about it. You know, I, of course, had some bad cars.
I've unwillingly bought something and never used it.
I wanted to start making bread. Yeah. So Chrissy, for my birthday or Father's Day, bought me a bread maker,
Yeah.
and it even though I didn't purchase it, you know, we purchased it, and it's still brand new in the box.
You
And
still
then
have
years
it
ago-
right now?
And I feel bad because, like, you always have these ideas of I'm going to start doing something.
Where's the box?
And you're thinking if I make an investment, it'll motivate me to do it.
Do it.
It's in the garage, still in the box,
Still there.
still in the plastic.
Still waiting to be used.
That's the only thing that comes to mind. I've bought all kinds of things, thinking buying something does not motivate you to do it.
Yeah. What about buying stuff for the kids, thinking they're going to enjoy it, and then they
Oh,
never
gosh.
use it?
Yeah.
Every Christmas, dude, I get talked into buying something for the kids, and I'm like, they'll really like it, and they use it like twice.
They play with the wrapping paper instead.
Bro.
Yep.
Yeah.
We bought scooters for Caden and Maverick one time, and they weren't crazy expensive electric scooters, but I think scooters are a little lame anyway. But I told Lindsay, I said, no, we are not getting them scooters. They're like, they've been talking about it we really use it. I guarantee you they haven't ridden those things more than the only time they ride them is when I finally threw them away. But anytime they would ride them was only when I threatened to get rid of them. Like, we like them, we're gonna ride them, and they'll ride them for like that day
And-
for like 30 minutes, and then that's it, and then
Yep.
it sits there, and so I tossed them. Nothing grinds
Oh,
my
man.
gears more than that. Buying something for the kids and they never use it.
Yep.
Oh man. All righty. Well, Jared, you got a serious question for us?
I do. I'll preface this. Just hang with me for a second because I feel like it needs a little context to set up. So this is something I've been really thinking about over the last little bit. I heard a guy say something that really sparked this question as we were talking about what we wanted to say on here. And so I just kind of wrote some thoughts. So I'm just going to read it because it'll probably set it up better than me just going off the top. But it's this. It says, pastors are often seen as unapproachable and without faults, and I think held to a higher standard than even maybe they should, right? But just like everybody else, we struggle in lots of different ways. We fail as men, we fail as husbands, we fail as friends, as employees, brothers and sisters. The list goes on and on. And we fail in our spiritual disciplines, I think, too. All of us do. And so knowing that accountability and honesty are important parts of life, what area specifically in your life right now would you find is maybe the weakest, that you're praying that God would help you in, or that you need accountability in, to step up and be a better blank, whatever that is? Because I think, let me just say one more thing. I heard a pastor say that if you always preach in a way that lets people think that you have it all together, then they will not feel honest and that they can come to you. If you're not open and, show some vulnerability, then they just have this perception that, man, I'll never be like that. And that's not true.
Right.
So I think it's important to be honest and open in a lot of ways.
I knew it was going to be deep. I knew it.
Well, I'll go ahead and start.
Which one of y'all got stoned this week?
Oh man. No, so
It's confession time.
the thing that I've asked people to keep me accountable for lately, there's been two things specifically. I've actually thought about this a lot over the last probably 2 or 3 months. The first thing, I didn't realize that I was either already or becoming an angry person. It sounds terrible to say. My kids have brought it out in me a lot. They've tested me in a lot of ways that I never expected. And so I guess before then I was just able to push everything down. But you can't push down a little kid. You can.
Oh,
but
you
it's
can.
not nice.
You can.
But yeah, so anger is one that I'm just working on because it's I don't know. I just noticed it rising up in me a lot lately. And so really working on that. The second one for me is discipline. Like you said, spiritual disciplines, but even something as simple as making the bed. I just quit doing it. It's like I'm an adult. I don't have anybody watching me. I want to sleep in my bed again in 12 hours, 14, 16, whatever. Who cares? And when I really started praying about it and thinking about it, of course, there was other things too. That's just one example. But realizing that what discipline is it's not necessarily doing things that you don't like doing. It's also stewarding the things that God has given you. Whenever you look at discipline as taking care of what God has given you, then it starts to transform how you think. So that's one thing that I've been really working on is like trying to be disciplined in my time management and in taking care of things. So like making the bed. I don't think God necessarily cares about my bed being made, but he cares about the money that I spent to buy the bed, the sheets, the comforter, all that stuff, and to take care of it. It's taking care of the things that God's given you, right? He's given me time in a day, and he cares how I spend it. And so realizing that time management isn't just something that's arbitrary and doesn't really matter a lot. I know everybody knows that, but realizing that God cares about it though, because he's given us 24 hours in a day, and it matters how we spend each one of those 24. So really, those are my two things that I've been working on a lot and praying a lot about, and having people hold me accountable to. Next.
and Jordan saying something about have you got stoned today.
Yeah, well, maybe you
He's
should
talking
explain that.
about
Little context.
he's talking
for that.
about. I got the opportunity to preach yesterday, and it was on the last 10 verses of Hebrews chapter 11, where it's going through the heroes of the faith, and then it transitions and says, but some were tortured, and some were beat with whips, and some were imprisoned, and some were stoned, and some were sawed in half. And so I was like, well, that's not really relatable to people in America because we don't really face that kind of persecution. And so
Not anybody
I
gets that
asked,
kind of stoned anymore.
Yeah.
anybody got stoned today, and I didn't think about the other side of that question. So Jordan thought it was funny, but
I wasn't the only one.
even in
There was
you
a
saying
low
that,
rumble.
part of my struggle, and I just realized it when you said it. Like I gave an example yesterday, and it seemed honest, and it was honest, but it was something that was 6 or 8 years ago. Smoking cigarettes. I gave an example, which was I stepped out in faith on that night because God put so much pain on me that I had to change, or things were going to get worse, right? But when I got done and was reflecting on the day, I realized, like, how am I doing that now, right now? Not, you can look back and have so much gratitude to how far God has brought you, but a lot of times you kind of cower in, what do I need to do now in stepping out in faith? And so that, you can be honest to a certain extent, but still only you and God know what you're really holding back. And presenting yourself as being honest, open, free, vulnerable. People, you can deceive people because they don't know me. They don't know how long ago that was. They don't know that was when I was in Clinton
Right.
9 years ago. They might be thinking that was 6 months ago, so I think that's the tough part as a pastor. Some things that I've struggled with lately is just in all the busyness, like a lot of great things have been happening around here that I've got to be a part of. But when I get busy, my prayer life struggles. I struggle praying. I don't struggle praying for people. I don't struggle saying prayers, but I struggle getting quiet and still to be able to ask God those things you don't want to ask Him. Like, where do I need to be stepping out in faith? What is hindering me from you? And it should happen more than just doing a fast a time or two a year. And then you get motivated, right? And you invest in something, or you decide to make a change, and then people quit asking you about it. And like, well, this don't really matter. I'm going to quit making my bed, or I'm going to go back to smoking, or I'm going to go back to nicotine pouches or dip, or because it's a stress reliever, right? It's and some is what makes it hard is sometimes those things are a sin, and sometimes they're not. Just like drinking or eating cheeseburgers or ice cream, or whatever your thing is. Praying's been hard lately. Having the time and the space, making the time and the space, time management, because you feel like I'm doing all these things for other people, and it needs to be done, and you're just having a lack of faith of like, I need to put first things first. So that was something that kind of hit me in the face yesterday. And it's funny, like when you preach or lead or teach, or people almost cheer you on the more open and transparent you seem, but only you and God know those deeper, like how actually transparent you are. Because it's humiliating to confess those things, especially in front of a crowd. And then, people are comfortable with Sunday's supposed to be a worship song, an announcement video, 2 songs, meet and greet.
15-minute message.
Yeah, and then we're going to
Right.
sing another song and have a response to prayer, and we're going to say woo and go on about our day, right?
That's right.
And only you and God know when He's calling you to do something wild.
Yeah.
And something that scares me about church is we do a lot of things the same way a lot of times. And I don't ever want to get sucked into not being wild for God, and just treating this like a job. And unless you got people asking you, and unless you got people allowing that kind of freedom to respond to God in whatever way He asks you to, then you just get caught up in going through the motions. So it's something we don't talk about a lot, but it wears me out. So yeah, that those would be my things.
Jordan.
I think mine is probably pretty much the same as yours, Nick, about having, and I think a lot of it has to do with stage of life too, with having young kids and but just having the quiet, not just prayer time, but devotion time, and scheduling that thing out. And it's like, especially with my kids, like I've always been a little bit of a night owl myself, like, and it was different when it was just Lindsay and I, and she'd go to bed early and then I'd stay up and watch a movie, or I'd get interested in a documentary, or might read something. I rarely would read something, but I'd normally watch a documentary or something. And now my boys are older, and so they stay up with me, and man, we'll like stay up till like midnight, watching cartoons and whatever. And for me, it's like a cool time hanging out with my kids. But dude, I'm realizing that I'm getting older, and like staying up late and then having to wake up and then be productive is hard. It is hard. You were talking about, when we were talking about video games a couple of weeks ago, and you said that you and your brother-in-law used to stay up playing Call of Duty, and then on Saturday night, and then have to wake up early and go play. Like y'all made a rule of that. We can't do this anymore.
We'd say, well, see you in 2 hours.
It's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and y'all are getting off of Call of Duty to get a couple hours of sleep before you got to do worship. But
Yep.
I think that's probably and it goes along with exactly what you're talking about, Nick. You can get caught in it's easy to get caught. It's easy to skip out on those things, on the important, like you have to have that. It all starts with your own personal relationship with the Lord, and that affects your marriage. It affects your parenting. It affects your work, and it's easy to get into the routines of doing all of those things, without remembering why you did it in the first place. And even in any kind of ministry, whether you're a missionary or you're pastoring a church, you can lay out your sermon series for the whole month or the whole year or whatever, and you've already got it all laid out, and it's not that hard to just go through it and not really be intentional about it, and like you said, leaving that room for kind of getting wild, not necessarily doing something crazy and, like all of a sudden we're going to start, handling snakes at church or whatever, but, just doing something that, just doing something that, remembering why you're doing it, and being receptive to, the Holy Spirit's kind of guide in it. And, we could plan tomorrow and then go through all of our plan and miss out on so much because we're focused on our plan. And never consider an opportunity of, somebody gives you a call or sends you a text and they need to talk to you or whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I'll call you later or whatever, and then you never make that time. But just maybe that time was something that God intended for you, or maybe that person was supposed to be a blessing to you and minister to you, or vice versa. And that's something that I definitely I've struggled with it for a long time, because I don't know, I've got the ADD, and so I'm all over the place all the time, and being able to focus is kind of tough, and being intentional, being able to slow down long enough to be able to be intentional in my actions, can be pretty tough.
Something that Jared brought up that we haven't really come back around to in your question, Jared, was obviously talking about spiritual discipline, but just you had asked, do people perceive that pastors have to be more all the time?
The James example about teachers. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Being above reproach.
Yeah, and I think not that we're not held to a standard, but I think that is a deception that you have to be on all the time, or that you have to, and that leads to sacrificing time, because you're like, I need to be something for somebody all the time, and that takes away from you creating the space to hear from God all the time, because you're trying to be all these things for all these people, and I don't know if necessarily God's asked you to.
Yeah.
So I said all that, Jared, to say, what are your thoughts on that side of it?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point. I actually wrote a couple of examples that I think may also help people to understand. As I'll start off here. This is what I wasn't going to start here, but I will. We all of us struggle with anger. I think I get angry at my wife. I'm frustrated with my kids. You got a long day. You this entitlement of like, I should have more time to myself, this selfishness attitude. I get angry with people who are driving on the island from out of town slow.
15 miles an hour.
I obviously don't love God perfectly, or love my spouse the way that that Christ probably wants me to, right? I could go down a list of examples that I think all of us could go through a list of examples of how, honestly, idolatry, whatever we put above God in our lives, and it happens intentionally and unintentionally a lot of times, we do that, and all of those are seen as sin in God's eyes. And those, I think, are things that people deal with every day in their lives. It's like we're, as pastors, those things are real, and we're not excluded from the struggles that other people are. Now, there are obviously some things I think that I made a mistake one time. It's when you mentioned what you said Sunday. I hate saying God told me or anything like that. So I just was brought back to a moment in my mind. Probably about 7, 8 years ago, I was preaching a message at another church, and I was talking through, and I had heard a pastor say in a message one time, you don't go from smoking weed to the next time doing black tar heroin. That's what he said. That's what he just threw out. And I didn't have it on I didn't even think I had it on my notes, but I was just talking about sin and stuff. And I quoted that. And as soon as I said that, because it was easy for me to say, because I knew I didn't struggle with that. And I think that's a lot of times easy. Let's just be honest. It's easy for us to go up against things. Man, I ain't got that problem. How do y'all not?
Well, that's normally the examples I'll give, because you've already either been through it and seen the other side of it, and I think the harder thing to do is to say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I said that, and as soon as I said it, I looked down at the front row, and there was a girl sitting there that I knew had overdosed twice and had to be brought back. And I couldn't even finish my message because I had so kind of, I mean, I did, but it messed me up because what I did was I said something to paint it in a light that I was like, man, I don't understand how. And then I didn't even think, and I saw her, and I knew that she was brought back with Narcan, and she was a younger girl, and it's like God just struck me in that moment and was like, you just, one, you need to be careful with your words, but you don't need to say, just because you don't struggle, don't give the perception that you don't.
Right.
Or that, you got it all together.
Well, that goes back to that sanctification process that I got convicted about this week and studying for that was just because sanctification is a progress, right? It's never ending. And just because some people are in a different stage than you are doesn't mean anything. And, the terrible thing we do is just that. We kind of qualify ourselves, no matter how we say it, of, well, at least I don't do this, or at least I don't do that, or at least I'm over that. And anger isn't as bad as black tar heroin.
Right, right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But it is.
Yes.
And that's the
Probably
point.
worse.
It's like you are... I was just reading this morning and yesterday. I've been going through James, and he talks about those who are called to preach, and there is this sort of higher standard. It's like you have to go. So, what are your thoughts on that? You go into it knowing like that the Bible tells us, like, if you're going to be a teacher, you need to know that this expectation, it shouldn't be taken lightly. Because we're all a reflection of Jesus, and essentially how we act, how we speak, and stuff. But to stand up in front of a group of people, whether they're youth or whether they're small group, or to stand in front of, like you did for 4 services yesterday, to get up there, like, we need to understand, like, there's some difference in there. So what does that look like?
What does it look like between the differences of who you're speaking to, or?
Well, I'm just saying when James, I believe that's what it says. It says that, how does that change? Does that change the calling for those who are preachers and teachers? I wasn't even planning on going there with this question here, but it just ended up.
Here we are.
I think it should raise like an awareness of what we've been talking about being careful about the words that you use. But really, that should go across the board for everyone.
So we're the lead sacrificers, right? We should be doing that first. So
That's right. And if we're not ready to do that, then we shouldn't expect.
What I thought about, what would it look like if I got up there Sunday and said, hey guys, I have not prayed like I ought to. I have not confessed my sin like I ought to. And I don't know if I'm prepared to do this today. Somebody else is going to have to do it. What would they have done yesterday? Right?
Yeah, I mean, throwing some people for a loop for sure.
But is that, instead of just playing church, is that wildness I was kind of talking about, like doing something, not just for the it factor or the being extreme or radical, but just what would God have done with that and done with those people? And that was kind of like all the examples he gives in Hebrews, like all those crazy things happened because people decided,
What was it talking about? Using their weakness in that.
Using their weakness as strength.
Yeah. So I mean, really, if they're paying attention to that verse, then, being transparent with our weaknesses will actually amplify and show God more, because you're pointing out and telling people, hey, this is my weakness, but they might actually see a strength in you in that area. But if you're honest about it and say, hey, like, organically, or at its root, like, I struggle with this, like, like, I remember when I was a kid, and like, speaking in front of people, like, public speaking was a terror for me. Like, dude, I was terrified to get up and talk about, like, I could be in a small group and cut up and be a clown, but I remember when I was a kid and going to, church, and I got selected out of the, Sunday school or whatever, to be the kid that would read the scripture for that morning. I remember I never did it, and I'd always get my sister to do it for me, because she was into theater and drama, and she didn't mind being in front of people.
Yeah.
And but now it doesn't, like, I still get nervous about it sometimes, but like, it becomes a non-issue, because of all I can say is just God he takes over. He create out of that weakness, he makes a strength, and it's all him. And so, of you being transparent and say, hey, it's been a tough week, and I haven't really had the time to be quiet and pray about it, and study, or whatever you want to call it. But then you end up saying something that really ministers to people, and they're like, well, dang, that's got to be from God, because he clearly wasn't prepared. And there's a lot that goes with that on because I mean, I've had times where I prepared for a message, and you write. I used to write it out, like, anytime I prepare, and I'd have like a full page of notes to write. And then I had one time where I was like, I spent a lot of time going through it, and then it was like, all of a sudden, God, like, that morning or whatever, was just like, this isn't it. Like, this is, you gotta talk about this. I'm like, okay. And then I wasn't prepared for it. I was not prepared, but God was.
Right.
And so through that weakness, he showed strength. And I'm not saying that gives us an excuse to just never be prepared.
Willy-nilly.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wing it all the time.
Yeah. Well, in the verse that I was referring to, the passage is James 3. It says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that he who teach will be judged with greater strictness, for we all stumble in many ways. So I think that's the acknowledgement first and foremost there. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle his whole body. And then it goes on to talk about the tongue and the power of the tongue. But essentially the strictness there is like, we just need to know that when we step into that, like, God's looking at us like, okay, I'm looking at your words that you're speaking, how you're modeling, how you're living that out. And I think that's, an important piece, because if we don't identify with our people that we, on the teams that serve, or the congregants that sit underneath, and look as though we're just another person, and we understand, and we, I think a lot of times, at least I've heard people say this, like, it's like the Pope, there's this, I've had friends that I know who grew up Catholic that think, like, it's like the Pope's like Jesus, and essentially that, there's no fault. If I could just, if he prayed for me, I'd be healed, that type of thing. And there's this, I think, just a misconception in general for a lot of churches, as that pastors just don't do that. And I didn't go, so I'm going to give you mine just so I'm not talking about it all. Definitely prayer is one of mine. I'll share another one in a second, but I have gone through seasons where prayer has been really strong, and then there's times that has not. And we pray with our kids before bedtime. We pray at every meal, and I pray before bed. But there, as far as like, and as in group settings too. Like, I mean, we do that as in our staff meetings, and as just in times like anytime somebody says, hey, pray for so-and-somebody in our group me text, like I try to stop at that moment and do it. But to be able to just like pray and
Like
really
relational prayer?
seek God. Yeah, and like just with no agenda, not coming, or even feel out of obligation. Man, I have been in just a weird a season of like, Lord, at night I'm like, help me, because I see friends of mine who talk about that, and I've read books and people talk about it. I'm like, that's never been like my big strength. But I want it to be better, and I realize that, I feel kind of like a hypocrite a lot of times to do it. The other one is really, with our family, we homeschool our kids, and, our kids are involved in church and stuff here, but Nick, you said this, Wednesday night, you can't rely on other people to bring your kids. Like, that's your responsibility as your parent, to do that. And so Amanda and I, it's sad to say now, but like Amanda and I, before we got married, we did devotions together on the phone or in person for like a year straight, every day. Like, we went through books. If I was, every day we'd make sure we went this book together, and then, just praying and stuff together. So we had a really, really strong foundation. We didn't, it was pretty crazy. People were like, what? Like, we didn't get into our first argument until a year into our marriage. Like, it was abnormally weird. But things changed, and you add kids to the mix, and just life and comfortability and stuff like that. And so we went through a long spell of like not doing that together. And I got really convicted about, it was probably a year and a half ago, and I started listening to some guys because I just felt like I'm not leading my family very well in just discipleship, devotion. Like, again, we would do like prayers before bed and prayers at mealtime, but like really just kind of pouring into my kids. Now, like, there's life. You're like, okay, here's what's going on in the world. Here's what the Bible says. Like, people are doing that, but to literally sit down with your kids and stuff like. And same thing with Amanda and I. And so we went through like a several month stint where we got back in a really good habit of praying together in the mornings, and our kids, just trying to, a lot of people call family worship. Like, we would do worship songs together. And then we went on this trip, and we thought, man, it's going to be great. And we went on this trip around the country, and it just tanked. I mean, it was like we were doing better not on the trip. And it's something that Amanda and I have said, and I think it's both parents' responsibility to help do that, but also kind of responsibility for the father in the relationship to lead and help lead their family. And so that's something that I've been praying about, is to being more intentional, because I feel like that's a responsibility of us, and I need to do better. And I've told my best friend and mentor, like, I need you to hold me accountable for that, and to help. And so, I'll say it here, like, it's easy to get into the routine and go, oh man, we had a lot going on this week. You said it. It's like, oh, I'm busy. I'm not doing stuff. I'm not like just sitting around going, dude, I got all this time and nothing to do. It's like, you can be involved in sports. You can be involved in church and, nonprofit organizations, and still have a deficiency when it comes to your prayer life and to devotional life and just, living it out. So that's where I'm at.
I concur.
And that's the best response.
You saying that, one of the toughest things, and I think it's because, do you ever feel like you are spiritually growing, or your wife's spiritually growing, but you're never at the same time? It is the hardest thing to do, to come together, because that is the last thing the devil wants, is for you and your wife to come together and move toward God at the same time. And so, yeah, you saying hardest thing I've ever tried to do. Anytime me and my wife have tried to do a Bible study or even read at night, or it's always something. And you can blame it on your kids. You can blame it on people calling and texting. You can blame it on, and the worst thing in the world could be happening, but it's still like, you got to make your bed every day, not because it's necessarily what you're supposed to do, but what the military general guy, like, you want to change the world, start by making your bed every day.
Right.
You want to change the world, start by loving your wife the way Jesus does. Don't try to start this group or church or ministry, or we could change the world if we start this revolution, or like the revolution starts with one thing, one person, one way.
Michael Jackson had a song about that.
Heal the world.
No.
I'm starting with
The
the man in the mirror.
I'm asking him to change his ways.
That's funny. I mean, so the bottom line is for everybody listening.
Come on.
today, is that man? We just
Thank you, Nick.
We
It's funny. The two music guys they were like,
That's a hole in my music.
That's what you're missing. The bottom line is, yeah, we all struggle, and we're in that boat too. Kyle was riding with me just like 30 minutes ago. Remember how long it's been back from lunch?
Yeah.
I'm yelling at the guy in front of me.
Yeah.
He's going 15 miles an hour, and I'm like,
dude, what about all the daggum golf carts lately? I'm
I said, what are you doing? And then I started to pass him, and I was like, he'll probably follow me
irritated.
to the gathering because we were like 2 blocks away.
That's the way it always happens.
so irritated at golf carts lately.
If I ever honk the horn while I'm out on 17, they are definitely pulling into church.
Yeah. That's
Dude, I had a lady. Did I tell you
You
about
told me this
the
morning.
bicycle lady? I had a lady riding her bicycle. Where do you ride your bicycle? Like and she had like the spandex on and everything. Where do you ride your bicycle?
You're supposed to ride in the bike lane.
On the right side of the road, right?
Right.
She was riding on the left-hand side of the lane, like not totally
Like
in the
by
middle.
yellow line.
Yeah, but just imagine like
Yeah.
bike lane space,
Yeah.
but on the left-hand side of the lane.
Yeah.
That's where she was, dude. And I didn't know what she was doing, and she wasn't even going like that fast. Like she wasn't getting it. She was just riding, but she had the whole deal on. And so I kind of rode behind her. I wasn't sure what she was doing because that's weird. I've never seen anybody ride their bike in that part of the lane. And so finally, I just gave the horn like a couple like I didn't lay on it or anything. Went by her as I was going by her. Went past her. Looked in my rearview mirror. She flipped me the bird. I was like, "What? What?" In the
You remember the Beverly Hillbillies? That's how they say.
And then she
hello
pulled
around
into
here.
the gathering.
No, I saw her a little bit down the road, and I thought about saying something, be like, but
It wouldn't help. But
Yeah, we're people too, man. We have our own struggles, and
that's it.
We could do a never-ending podcast to
Oh,
talk about
yeah.
our struggles.
For sure.
So,
Well, fellas.
you want me to close it out?
Yeah. If you want to.
All right.
Come on.
Well, we're going to cue that music up. Hey, thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to the Walking Together podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's something that'll take and listen to, pass it along, share it with your friends and your family if you feel like this would be a benefit. And don't forget to, anywhere you get your podcast, be sure to give us a review, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or whatever that looks like. And if you have any questions, we would love to hear your questions, and you'd like an episode to be featured, send it to us at podcast@gatheringsurfcity.com. Is that right?
With an S.
With an S. Podcasts@gatheringsurfcity.com. Hey, we hope you guys have a incredible week, and we will catch you next time. God bless.